Welcome to Know the Rules of the Game podcast, Bear the Truth. I'm your host, Desirée Patno, CEO and President of Women in Housing and Real Estate Ecosystem, NAWRB, and Desirée Patno Enterprises Real Estate Brokerage, advisor and investor for Amicus Brain Innovations, Inc., and Chief Strategic Officer for Zulu Time, and the publisher of NAWRB Magazine and the NAWRB Report. Today, I'm so excited to have Sabaea and Sydni Wynter from the Bear the Truth. It's a 501(c)(3) platform that just was created here recently, and welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, yes. So we have New York and we have Sherman Oaks. Yes, we're on the platform here. We're doing the national thing here. So one of the things that I want to talk about real quickly before we take a deep dive into this is our council, Diversity, Inclusion, Leadership Council for NAWRB. We created the women's leadership principles, the 10 of them here recently. And it's really about creating the movement to help everyone be a trailblazer or you can believe, you can achieve, and things like that. So powerful. And today's podcast is really about helping the environment to get the children to be involved with the parents and at a very young age, because the idea is that if we can help get them into a program to where we can really give them an opportunity, and this is the leadership of a parent leadership to the children, right? And starting up at a very young age. So the relativity to what we're talking about is huge. So thank you, thank you. So one of the things I also want to go into, we take a deep dive into your background, is also about as our NAWRB report, the Women Housing Ecosystem Report. It's really about wealth is defined by having options. Society right now has created us to have so many different options, but also limited us in our options of movement, right? Shelter in place and the impact that's getting us out there. So with that being said, we're going to start off with Sabaea, and she is a fun fact about her. I'm going to have her open it up. She comes from multi-generational family of very famous tennis professionals, and her generation of dealing with this wealth of ingrained at a very young age, and what she's doing, a vehicle to mold and to guide into the capacity of having inspiring young minds on their journey to self-realization and actualization. So in her professional tennis life, she was the college state champion in Florida, and she was in top 10 in the nation during the time. So welcome, Sabaea. So tell us a little fun fact about yourself.
Well, I'm a fourth generation tennis player. My grandmother was part of a membership of a premier Black-owned, the first Black-owned tennis country club in the United States. And that's where my father and my uncle grew up playing, and they passed on the love of tennis and everything that came with it. And further down in their careers, they also themselves built their first Black-owned tennis camp in Massachusetts. And so I grew up in that environment, and we've always approached tennis as a vehicle to shape young minds and you know, to be an influence and to guide. So it was never really just about tennis. It was just a much bigger vehicle. And coming from a multiracial background, my mother's French, so I'm fluent in French also. It adds another layer of you know, this mission that I'm trying to push forth with children.
Excellent. Well, we talked earlier before we started about the fact that it was during the generation of Arthur Ashe, and Arthur Ashe is, you know, what a charismatic, beautiful, on the court, off the court human being. Just had so much. And so here you are, you just talked about, you know, first Black tennis in both multiple states. And just the lighting up of that environment, and really, to me, signifies why and how one of the componencies of your past experiences is starting Bear the Truth. So thank you and welcome, welcome. We'll talk more about that. So here we are to Sydni. She's in New York City. She is now going to be she's a junior right now, and going through the whole, you know, getting acclimated back into college is a whole new thing, right? In-ground, whatever. Look at that beautiful smile. Love it, love it. And having that environment. So a little bit about her. She is, here we go. She's currently studying media, culture, and communications with a minor in political science. And from a young age, she has a huge passion for social justice and social change. And from there, she has started with a group at NYC called Crying in Public. 6 women, all different races, all different backgrounds coming together. So talk to us a little about the fun fact about that.
So Crying in Public is actually my group of friends from NYU, and we're talking about how we have such different perspectives on so many topics because of our races, where we grew up, if we're immigrants, first generation. So that was our way of bringing new perspectives to different topics that we don't really talk about as women, and using that platform as a way to express those views and have that conversation.
That's excellent. Well, we had talked again a little earlier about the platform really getting into the, we'll call it, it gets brushed underneath the rug, you know,
Yes.
real deep subjects. So talk to a little about that. So that we can frame this really well.
Yes, we discussed how it's so taboo for women to talk about subjects like politics or about sex. It's such an open forum. So for us, we wanted to break down that stigma, especially as young women, and allow us to have those conversations across generations, across races, so we can start to open up those conversations as well and allow girls to feel comfortable talking about those different things.
Excellent. Well, if you think about, okay, if we're supposed to be shelter in place, and where do we go out and you're not supposed to be touching people, how do you date? How do you have relationships? So at your age, the most powerful, high school and college, is something we never forget. You know, as we get older, we always, it's the most impressionable time of our life. So kudos for you. And again, we're talking about, we'll definitely have you back on for Crying in Public. That is just an unbelievable. So thank you for joining us. So one of the things that's incredible, you guys put together, and thank you to our She Centerfold for our diversity inclusion, for our diversity, equity, inclusion magazine issue that's online right now that everyone can get a copy of. Fun fact about that magazine is that it's actually being promoted right through Warner Brothers right now. So you can't, how cool is that, right? Have it on the newsstand. And your article, Bear the Truth, that we connected with, is actually on page 24, is being promoted right now there. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is really about the impact of what this is the grassroots of what you're doing and putting that together. So you put it down as that Bear the Truth as a team, as a way of teaching the next generation the power and the necessity of their voices and making change for their future, right? So that being said, let's go ahead and start with Mom. Okay. How did this come together? And Sydney, how did you guys bring it on together and say, we're going to do this?
Well, it started with my neighbor, Lily. She had an idea. We both wanted to participate in the movement that was going on, but obviously we have small young children that are 2-year-old, and we couldn't physically go out. So she came up with this great idea to send our children's teddy bear off to a teddy bear protest on their behalf. And it really morphed into something that was so much more. So it wasn't just about the time that parents and children took to bond and decorate their teddy bears, but there was the opportunity to have deeper conversation about not only the protests that were going on at the time and still, but also to talk about COVID and why you can't go out yourself and do all of these things and why it wasn't safe. And so I was fortunate enough to have my stepdaughter, Sydney, in the house. And I said, hey, we'd love a little bit of help. And I also wanted that younger generation's perspective to make sure that we were still in tune and in touch with what's relevant. So it's important to surround yourself by the younger generation. And
excellent.
So, yeah, Sydney came in and she did amazing because she was finishing her NYU schooling. She was also doing her internship for Hillary Clinton as well, and launching her podcast all at the same time. So it was quite impressive to see the hard work.
Excellent. So Sydney, here you are in the room. Mom comes in and goes, okay, well, we're going to send our teddy bears there. What was your initial gut reaction to that?
At first, I was like, okay, because I figured it was just like a neighborhood thing or community thing. But once I got involved and it started to blow up and I saw the passion behind it, I was so intrigued because my studies are focused around making politics more accessible for disenfranchised groups. So this is my first time really doing that in action. So I loved helping out with it.
Excellent. Well, exactly. I mean, how do you get a whole, I mean, if you think the political side right now, how do you get in touch with a congressional person or a senator, or how do you get legislation change, and how do you rise to the top to be heard? Because there's so much, you know, we've never had 24/7 politics on every channel to become an overload. And then to deal with COVID, and then to deal with, the various different, crises that we talked about, so much going on, that why now? What is it going to get involved? And so having that ability to take something grassroots that you're passionate, that you saw the passion behind, okay, then I need to take a part into this because this is going to further my education, but also it allows me to take something that is right organically, I can help control versus then doing something for someone else. So love that capacity to go with that. All right, so let's take a deep dive into it. As we hear it and know the rules of the game, we're all about having rules. What can we do so we don't fall back and say, if I only known? One of the biggest things is that we talked before is that as a parent, I have 4 children. We don't have a rule book. We don't have a cookbook. Oh, yeah, this is how we do it. Because the way we do it, how we do it, whether I'm living in Irvine, California, whether I'm in another state, another country, what I'm used to, what I'm not used to, economic privilege or not privilege, or whole different dynamics. So what does that mean, being a mother? And so rule number 1, racism is not innate, but taught and or learned. Teach anti-racism. So I'm going to talk with it from you, Sydney, first, because here you are starting a new podcast, Crying in Public, really taking a focus of having all different nationalities and different class experiences in life. And you see that right away. So what does that mean to you, and how is that rule going to be applicable? And then we'll go back to Sabaea.
Actually, our first episode was about this topic, about race, and how growing up, racism is something that's innate, something that we learn, whether it's through our parents or through TV shows or through society, things that we see and we reciprocate or we regurgitate or we copy. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea of being anti-racist is actually teaching those policies or teaching those ideas that we're all equal, although we might have different colors, different sizes, different shapes, that we are all human, we're all equal. So I think that what's important is that we take the time, like Sabaea said, when the kids are younger, to really teach them, don't say this, don't treat people differently because of the way they look and things like that.
Got it. So what about, we were talking about earlier, Sabaea, about the, Crayola came out with, 24 shades of brown, all different shades that go with it. If you think about, the makeup line, I remember, I don't know how many years ago, it was 10 or 20 years ago, that they had a huge thing about having different makeup lines that really addressed, different shades of brown for makeup versus then, okay, you're light, dark, or in between, there's no such thing. That I think is really powerful because it's toys. You talked about, Sydney, about when you're going looking at, it's a learned event and how you apply it. Well, the biggest thing is that mom can't be mom 24/7 in the sense of watching and seeing everything you're doing. So you have toys that they play with, whether it's on a digital platform or a physical arts and crafts kind of thing. So talk to me about that, Sabaea, that, what does the rule number 1 mean to you and how that Crayola thing came into play? I think it's huge.
Well, I think for rule number 1, it begins with accepting the fact that racism is taught. And so you take ownership, and then we wanted to provide everyone with practical ways to raise anti-racist kids. So that could begin with having a really diverse playroom in your home. And as you mentioned, Crayola came up with these multicultural markers. And so I actually bought a set for my son, and it's really just about enforcing the love and the beauty of all these different shades. So instead of, taking blue and green all the time, no, we're going to go with this pastel pink or this brown, and and even seeing which colors. I say, okay, well, which color do you want to select, and see what he gravitates to. And ironically, most of the times it was the brown or the black. And so it's creating spaces where it's just a little bit more inclusive of other cultures, books that have leading characters that are minorities, that are girls, because statistically only, I think, roughly about 3% of literature has minority-led leading characters. And so we need to improve upon that if we want to really create an anti-racist society for our children and help them develop and grow. So that's what that means to me. And it might be something small and mild, like just a set of markers. And then depending on the age, you can go a little further. And one of the things that we're also doing with Bear the Truth is creating conversation cards. And these conversation cards will provide educators and parents with the ability to pull from the deck and have practical questions. Okay, well, how do I talk about racism with my child? What does that sound like? Where does it begin? And so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It'll be available for you and you can just read off of it. And it's something that might say, okay, let's make a portrait, and let's pick all kinds of different colors and things. And let's see, what do you think you look like? And they could cut out all kinds of different shapes and colors and just showing the love and beauty of culture and color.
I think it's fantastic. The conversation cards, if you think about, back in the day, you had the, cue cards for arithmetic or for, letter cards or, what does this mean? Yeah. And then if you go into the older generation, for figuring out psychology-wise what they're looking at, well, what does this image look like to you? Do you see the goat or do you see the person? Do you see a rabbit or whatever thing? And by having as many, if you think about greens and blues, like you brought up, how many color shades do you have of that? But then how many real color shades of brown? So if you had as many color shades of your darker colors than you do of your bright, brilliant colors, then as a society, we have an opportunity to really embrace the real integration and not go one way or the other. It allows us to really think and say, okay, do you think this way or do you think this way, and have that opportunity to grow. So the integration, I think, is fantastic. The other thing I think about from the Raisins 9 and 8 is one of the problems we're having here at the organization for the last 12 years is finding artwork of mature women. Who would have thought that here we are in 2018, there's more people in the United States that are 65 and older than are 5 years or younger. And yet we can't find enough artwork that is quality enough, that is integrated enough, that we can create good marketing tools for that. So if you think about how much art is actually for younger generation that are people of color, that you can actually put it out there to really get a good sample, just as far as toys going. As far as, Mattel, I know, came out with the Barbie doll with all the different, integrations and things, and clothing, hairstyles, what does that look like? I think it's very, very powerful. So I love it. Now, if you were to take that to expanding, you talk about the conversation cards, the images that are on those conversation cards, the deck that you have of that conversation cards, having multicultural communication cards that are not just digital format, I think it'd be a great play to go with it, like you're talking about. So excellent, excellent. Would like to anything else add to that as far as Sydney?
One more thing. I think this is so important because, especially as a young Black girl growing up through elementary school and middle school, I always felt that the burden of teaching other kids to not be racist always fell on me. And my perspective was always that if I'm old enough to know it's a bad thing and to feel the pain from it, why can't the other person understand that it's offensive? So I felt that no longer should the burden fall on Black and brown students to feel the need to teach other people how to not be racist instead of the parents, which is where the competition cards come in.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point, because I think a lot of people in the Black and brown community feel that way, where it's like, there's enough resources, there's enough information out here. Why do you have to turn to the Black girl in the room and say, hey, how does, you're the spokesperson for the whole community, or you'd be like, oh, I didn't know. So I think this really just, parents have to be involved. Parents have to raise their children. They have to be active, and this permits them to.
Well, I think here in Irvine, we have a very incredible program for mentally challenged or physically challenged students. And if you think into it, they go in and they help them. My children, every one of them signed up to go teach one. I remember one of my sons took an entire semester to teach one of the children to tie their shoestrings. And after I think it was 3 months, got him physically able to be able to tie his own shoe. And that was huge. And so the idea is that it's the same idea, is that they now got exposed to not everyone has the same ability, and there's things and how to deal with it. And same, you're saying, why do you go to the person who has some challenges or has some kind of disability? Well, how does it feel to you, you know, when they're physically hampered or thing? And same, so I didn't put those two together, and I totally see that now. That's very yeah, the very, 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 okay, got it. Yeah. So rule number 2, and we can go back and forth on these. Equip parents and educators with the tool and resources necessary to educate themselves and others. And we were talking about the conversation cards, and we're talking about the toys. How can we go out there and help call on big business, big companies? You know, we're talking about support because this is a 513, so you're a nonprofit. How do you raise the funds? It's still business. And to get the corporations and entities to help facilitate this, and the school districts to facilitate this communication, because it's parents, educators that have the children at most, right, at the time that we have together. So how can we help you with this rule?
Sydney, did you want to start? Or
yeah, you can start and I can go.
Well,
love the mother-daughter thing, girls. It's okay.
what I've learned through this experience is there's a lot more good out here than what we're seeing portrayed on the media. And there's a lot more people that want to contribute and participate. And may I say specifically from our white brothers and sisters, you know, so that is really encouraging. And I think that we're in a time where corporations understand that they must align themselves with this movement of inclusion, because this is what the people want. And ultimately it is about us. And so we were working, one of the things we're working on for companies to be involved in is a large sculpture, about 10 foot, the size 10-foot bear. So it'll be a Bear the Truth. And so they can sponsor the creation of this bear, and we will seek out a local artist who will decorate it and design it. And then we will ask the company if they would like to have the bear placed at a local, perhaps inner city school, or maybe a city park, somewhere where this sculpture is a place where conversations about inclusion and racism and many other social justice issues can be had, and it shows their alliance with this cause, and that the children are the future and they want to be a part of this movement.
It's very interesting you have that, because if you think about the financial district on Wall Street, they had the bull, right? Yeah. They put the woman, and here I am.
Yeah.
And you're doing the same thing. You're making a symbolic bear that if you traveled, or if I understand this correctly, that if you take the bear and as temporarily being like, you can go visit the bear and have, it'll be here being showcased for the next, 30 days at X venue, have all the conversation, and have a moving bear that went as a symbolic and not being planted. That way, whether it's in the South, whether it's in the North, in the East, or the West, the conversations can be very different, right? Because of the culture and the jumping on the bandwagon. So I love it.
Yeah.
That is something that truly will have an impact, in my opinion, that the kids will go, well, why is there a bear here? Why are we going to go see it? And if you have like a, what do you want to call it? You know how you have the traveling circuses? You have fun events that are all like the Crayola, different kind, get Crayola to come in with different kind of markers and different kinds of things to show the cultural changes of toys that are available to buy, that maybe are small businesses just starting out and big businesses coming in to integrate that. It's a great merging. It's a great thing. So Sydney, what else would you like to add to that?
My biggest thing was always that Google is free. So if you ever have questions about certain topics surrounding race, or if you want to find Black businesses support or restaurant support in your area, you can always go to Google. I feel like we talked about earlier, don't always default to asking your Black and brown friends, but instead use the tools that have been given to you, like Google, to find those things, find ways to support local businesses, restaurants, different things like that that can help you.
The only thing, I totally agree with you. The only thing I can say about tech is still 30% of the United States doesn't get involved in tech in some capacity. So as much as I want to sit here and say, right on, a lot of your small entrepreneurs are hands-on SB kind of people, right? Or people that are not on SB, that they're even smaller in the sense that even not based on size, but they're not technically savage in the sense of utilizing it to their capacity. And those that are exceptionally incredible, like I had a friend who used to go to Rwanda all the time and bring back the most beautiful artwork, bring it to the United States, sell it, and then send the money back to support the family, because that's how they did. They had no internet, no way of supporting, getting their arts and crafts out. So to your point, you're right, Googling, but I think that if there's a way that you can channel that this is your local ambassador, something we were talking about before about having NAWRBs as the college Zoomer, the life of the student, to get that our resources. Our goal here at NAWRB is to really give you the vision on creating an opportunity with 60% of the jobs not being created today. You have to create your own opportunities, your own jobs, because we have now been pivoted 100% on life, and what we have. COVID will never allow us to go back to real life in the sense that what we consider our normal avenue. And the way we're changing things, this is actually a good opportunity to embrace new opportunities and new way of undoing things that have been acceptable in the past. Okay. So that being said, having a way that through each of the delegates within each of the colleges saying, you know what, I know where grassroots resources are, that there's people that are in the community that can help us develop a bigger and better and get them on the platform through. And that way it's a personalization of a referral base that's not just through Google. I think that compliment through crying in the public, or crying and through Bear the Truth, or through other like Black Lives Matter or the Bill of Rights or any of those things, I think is a great way of interconnectivity. And that way it'll help for those who are not, 7% of the United States is unbanked, has never had a bank account. 27% are unbanked. So if you think about the capacity of 30% are being tied into the internet or have no digital platform, then it connects to even the deeper and the better we get more grassroots. So very cool. Is there, if you talk about the integration of toys and you go back into, give me some highlights that you would think that Sabaea, as a mother, that you feel as a 2-year-old right now with what's going on, how do you have a comfortable conversation and give them maybe 1 or 2 examples of a conversation that would teach is a proper way of dealing with that conversation?
Well, with our 2-year-old, anybody who's seen one, or it's limited, the conversation, but we started, so we were decorating our bear to send off to protest, and we didn't talk about anything. It was just the bonding activity between the girls and my husband and our son. And what I love most about Bear the Truth for me, and I was so proud of, is we can look back on this and I can say to my son, this is where your activism began, because it's also about that. It's about you being engaged. It's about you caring about social justice issues, whether you're protesting the broccoli I'm trying to make you eat or global warming. And that's what we represent. This is not just about race. This is about being active and involved in your community. And so I'm very proud to be able to show him that exact moment when it began for him. And I think, and then it transitioned. So several days later, I was working on my computer, and so he says, oh, mommy's bear. And so I said, well, what color is the bear? And so he says, brown. And I said, well, what color is Cole? He said, brown. And then I said, what color is grandma? And my mother's white. And he looks at her and he looks at me with this awe stare, because it's not white to him. So he can't describe it as such, and then say, maybe mommy is beige. But it was just that look, and he smiled and he didn't quite know. So it's just, that's what the conversation sounds and looks like. And it's just piece by piece. And as they hit different milestones, you increase the level of conversation to be had. And that's where we provide different stages for different age groups that you're able to be involved. And as you mentioned before, we have, what we're trying to do is expand across the country so that we have local chapters in most major cities and even most major states where people have access to this information. It might be through the library, because if you don't have a computer, we don't want money or lack of ability to be the reason why we can't do this together, you know. So.
Well, having children, you know, the experiences and things that happen, you know, you don't sometimes have the opportunity to say that I have enough money to do anything, right? And so in real estate, we know that sometimes you have single mothers that are, you know, at the hands of, you know, abusive support, and that they have to leave. And so that money and that access to resources is limited. So by having it instilled at a very young age, it actually can help handle conversations, because a lot of times we have interpreters, you know, for different languages and things that's going, like, you know, if I don't speak Spanish, then I have to go in and say, well, what are they saying? Same idea. I mean, if the children can help educate the parents because of their exposure, or the grandparents because of the fact that we've been raised in a different culture, that would be huge, right? So you're taking it from the grassroots. So if you get enough people, if you hear it, you know, the old mentality used to be, if you hear it enough times, then you start believing it.
Yeah.
So that being said, you know, our pre-conversation or podcast was that enough integration, enough opportunity of hearing the thought, then we believe in the opportunity. It's not just the parents, it's not just the educators, it's a collaboration. And then it's a collaboration of our tools that we use, our toys that we use, our resources that we can integrate, our technology, our in-person. It works. Love it, love it. Okay, so anything else you'd like to add for rule number 2? Are we good with rule number 2?
Rule number 2 is good.
All right, rule number 3. Highlight policies that don't grant equal access, specifically in education. I'll let you go ahead and start with that, Sabaea.
Oh, that was actually Sydney's one.
Sydney's question. You're in college. Sorry.
I just let her take it because she's in school and she's a lot closer to it. And I'd like to highlight the fact that Sydney and her sister were both raised in the Deep South in private school their entire life. And that experience itself as Black girls growing up in that system is a whole intriguing topic. And so her older sister decided to go with a historically Black college, and Sydney decided to go to NYU, which is a lot more liberal. And when I am privileged to hear their debates on issues and how their foundation from this private school system and where the faults were, what was good, this is what led us into our 3rd rule, which talks about unequal access in education. So Sydney.
So Sydney, so Sydney, if you could frame it, and that, thank you, Mom, for bringing that up. If you could frame what it was like growing up and some of the challenges we talked about, I know a couple months ago about your challenges. I'd love to hear that, because I think it really puts a spotlight on where we are today and what you're doing and why, because especially your siblings and how you're different. So go with that.
From the time that I was 3 years old, I've been attending private institutions, and most of them religious-based. And for the most part, I was usually the only Black girl in my class, if not maybe 2 or 3 others. So for me, I never had that really tied to my culture during school, because the extent of that was reading about slavery, or pretty much that's it, reading about like Civil War, that kind of history. So for me, I never saw my experience reflected in the curriculum or in my peers. So I think growing up, I didn't really understand that until I got to college, and I started to realize that things that I felt on a daily basis or experienced were things like racism, microaggressions, things like that. And it wasn't until my junior year of high school when a group of students had an N-word themed after party for prom. And they all came dressed as different stereotypes, whether it was a baby mama or a rapper, and some was even Trayvon Martin. And that was the first time I'd ever felt outright racism from people that I thought were my friends and my peers. So it was when that started that I realized that people truly don't understand how their actions and views of different minority communities affect those minorities. And so I think after that, I really got into social justice and just trying to create a way for people to understand the effects of their actions and their words. And one big thing was when I started to get into colleges such as NYU, people would always say to me that they hoped that I realized that it was because I was Black and that I was a diversity tick for the schools. And for me, although affirmative action has helped a lot of people from different disenfranchised minorities get into colleges, it doesn't really account for the fact that there's generational differences between low income or minority students versus white students in this country, which people don't really understand, whether it's access to AP classes. If you're from a low income neighborhood, they don't have AP at your school, or access to SAT tutors, SAT classes in your school. Things like that also affect getting into college. I think that although affirmative action does help us in those ways, there's so much more work to be done to create equality in education.
You know, I couldn't have said it better. You know, the framing of going through being the only one or one of two, let's say, in school and private schools, you know, the cost of going to private school, the cost of being in an environment that it's like your own world, and then to come out into another and to see, like you said, going to a party and then all of a sudden, wait a second, I thought we were cool and now we're not, right? I feel, and the thing is that yet, you know, we're supposed to be, our true friends are supposed to be there in time of need no matter what happens. And as something as simple as, like you said, the actions of what they're doing, to the hurt, the pain, the going down the path, you know, and if you think about, you know, the complexity of our life right now, dealing with COVID and everything else, is that, are you willing to subject yourself to go help someone in their time of need, or you just let them sit there, right? Or do you help them and go? And this is the whole merging of everything. And if we had a good foundation when we were children to understand that you help anyone in need, you don't care what, how, where, class, color, you know, where they're from, what they believe or not believe, they're still human beings. It's still a reality that we have to help each other. So now that you're in college and you have those experiences, and you see the challenges that we had, and you hear how it's constant of, you know, here we go again, and here we go back, and here we go again, and here we go back. How does it make you feel in your position in college that you're in a first time ever that we will not have college in place per se, where, yeah, you might right now, but it could go totally online? How do you feel that's going to help or change the education system to highlight the equal access opportunities that we're talking about, rule number 3 here?
I think it really exposes the challenges that come with higher education, because by requiring online classes, you're hoping that students have a laptop, have access to Wi-Fi, they have stable Wi-Fi, a home with quiet rooms. And for so many students have to stay home, they may have 5 siblings or live in an area with really poor Wi-Fi connection. They don't have access to these types of things. So classes are going to become 10 times harder for them. And then also, I know from my perspective, especially at NYU, because it's such a diverse school, being in a classroom and hearing and feeling people's emotions and expressions towards different things, especially in my major, whether it's politics or media or literature, that's shaped my own experiences and my views of the world. And it's just not the same over Zoom or online when everything is kind of a facade, to say.
It really is. I mean, because we could put a fake screen on here. I mean, this is real. There's 3-dimensional. We really got your magazine here. But you're right. You know, the whole idea is that you could put up any kind of background, any kind of life that's out there to make it feel non-connected. And when you're going through the educational program, I'm really nervous about the loss of communication, because we, as humans, want to feel the heartbeat, the heat, the smell. you stink today, but that's okay. I can smell you, right? Versus then, you know, oh my God, the gym doctor, let's go. Let's throw these out here. But the ability to have the senses, you know, and one of the things that I always talk about is that, you know, when you hear that song, the first note of a song that's special to you, your whole body just morphs into, I want to get up and dance, or if it was a romantic moment, or it was a candlelight dinner, or whatever it was, you just feel it. So now our whole lives, for the most part, for the next 6 months, or how long, or 2 weeks, or 4 months, whatever it is, we're going to have that energy and get that energy back, in my opinion, that we live through that song or that snow or whatever. So yeah, so the educational program from the college standpoint, how do we help you by the equal access? So we have companies that are setting up Wi-Fi's. We're having companies that are giving laptops. We're having, you know, parents, we're having, you know, a philanthropist that, you know, gave $40 million paying for college educations. We have them going out there and sending up, you know, streamer satellites during the, you know, Puerto Rico that went up and put up, you know, balloons to have internet. How can we help, you know, if you think about Bear the Truth, by keeping it non-digital sometimes and keeping it to where you have the Crayolas and having that opportunity into a classroom and get into college and a university, having the grassroots movement in the arts and crafts and the communication of being not so digitized, do you think that might help the college students in the sense that they could actually see something that's not all pretty and pink, you know, that it's got some kind of color to it that gives an imagery of complexity, of difference?
I think it really depends, because for a lot of these students, they're paying upwards of $50,000 a year for a Zoom class. And luckily for my major, communications, this is what it's all about, finding new ways to create connections with people. But for those who are at school for acting or for drama, they're having to do plays through Zoom. And for them, that's them losing their touch, their artistic touch, their experience of being in school for acting and having to act through a screen. So I think that if we could find ways to keep the authenticity of what college is supposed to provide, while also keeping the quality of education up, is probably the hardest part, was where creativity comes in that aspect.
No, I totally spot on. I totally agree with you. I know a woman who just turned her, she has a face mask that's really expensive. It's $300. And it's for the upper echelon just to have a screen face mask. And what she did is that, think about makeup. Where do you go? You go to makeup artist. Let me put your makeup on. Let me touch you. Let me feel you. And what she did is that you go online and she allows you to draw your makeups. Immediately, it actually takes a picture of your face and immediately says you're too dry. You need this. You need this. You need this. And then as it's repainting your whole face on the screen, it says and tell you what you need or not need to buy. It then says, would you like us to call you right now and talk to you and have a consultant? So as if you're in the store, you now have human interaction and you're not dealing with a digital market. You actually have that relate. So to you, would it be beneficial to the college student to still have that experience, let's say in an acting mode, that you had a third dimensional way to create that image of you standing here, right? Of being a person, to interact with that person, to connect the personalized user experience in college is where I think that relationship is going to have to go to keep that going. So, and I think that Bear the Truth is going to give you new directional ideas of having things that are symbolic, like the bull, and having different ways to just build on it. So I'd love to have that conversation. Sabaea, the highlighting the policies that don't grant equal access. We could talk about that, like we talked about with the, you know, women on boards, you know, calling out the different companies here in California where there's 188 companies that had no women on boards and now made it a mandate to have the women on boards, or there's fines. How can everyone help you in that rural policy about highlighting policies that don't grant it? So policies, maybe companies or integration. Well, give me some examples that you think would be great for that.
Well, Bear the Truth hopes to be almost the emblem that will represent that this company is truly diverse and integrated and about the children. And I find through conversation with executives that it's not that they are racist. I just think they're unaware, and it just doesn't occur to them that I'm lacking diversity. And so I think it's really about aligning yourself with people, even within your own company. Say, hey, I just want to make sure that we're on the right track, and say, what are we missing here? Am I missing something? And a lot of it is even words you might not know. You use a word, you might say black versus African American, and then you don't know, is that an insult, or is it appropriate?
Thank you.
No, but the only way to know is to really engage with someone who does, right? And so I think that if companies will want to be a resource, I think they're looking, they want to increase diversity, they just don't quite know where to go. And so if you can't just say to HR, hey, send me all of the black people resume, because obviously it's illegal, you can't do that. But what you can do is, for instance, you say, we will have a booth at every historically Black college. Let's establish relationships with the Alumni Association to be sure. So these are active and practical ways that you can be sure to be more integrated. But then there's also the issue of Latinos and Native Americans. So how do we address all of the other different races and cultures in our country? And Sydney had mentioned before, we've had great conversation about the type of education that is taught. And so Sydney didn't learn about the jazz era until she reached college, because everything that's taught is centered around racism, and movies, the books. And I think that schools need to, you need to look at your texts. How many of your texts are written by white men, or white people in general, and just kind of implement some systems and some numeric gauges to determine where you are and where you want to be. And I know it takes a little bit of time, but I think that they're active ways that companies and the education system and things that they can do now. So Bear the Truth wants to be that center, that resource where you can find alumni, you can find resources, you can find illustrators, authors, tech, everything, and just one-stop shop where you can find everything that you need to be more integrated.
That's great. I think some of the things that you're talking about is, here at NAWRB, we do third-party certification for women-owned and minority women-owned businesses. And the whole focus point, for lack of conversation, has been about the appearance that you're doing something for D&I, right? Or diversity inclusion in its capacity. And we really haven't talked about classism and things like that. And now we're into, okay, so equity, making sure that the accountability of D&I versus in just being, hey, we have it. And I think some of the issues is that sometimes, depending on the kind of business, you really are trying, but there is issues based on the specialization of it, that right now there might not be people that you can say that, okay, I am, a certain diversity classification for the company. And it might be publicly traded. So publicly traded, you can't. So the idea of you having an emblem of Bear the Truth, saying that you embrace and not be certified in it, but you're actually embrace that you are actively looking for talent. And actively, if you think about Bear the Truth, could be not just for, you could have Bear the Truth being for African American, and you can have, I have a friend that's from the Indian culture. What is it like to have, for the tribal side, and everyone have a different thing, saying we are all inclusive, we're all multicultural, we're all doing this. I think that's so powerful. So highlighting the policy. So if you were to have an emblem, what are let me give you one last thing on it. What would be a good example to highlight? If, I have, NAWRB had a platform to where, as we spoke all over the country, we would call out if there's not enough women speakers on so many different especially the tech world or the commercial world for real estate, or, you know, dealing with backdoor stuff. You know, I was the only woman, or I was one of a few women in the room. And how can we call out those issues that are not being done? What would be a little bit of a platform? You say you have an emblem, but how do we call them out to get them to say, not maybe because they have an emblem, but what would be a good example of that?
I think it probably needs to just happen on a more personal level. I don't think we're out to call out, if you will. We're just, you know, our whole message is teddy bears. This is about a soft, lovable approach. We're all about love and teddy bears. And so it's going to take people within Bear the Truth reaching out to companies and just building relationships and having conversations and just say, hey, have you considered? And, you know, that's more our approach. And we also have to be active. And if we identify industries and businesses, and we want to engage the community and C-suite level relationships, so that we can just say, hey, have you considered? You know,
I love it, because you're using the softness of a newborn. There's nothing better than a newborn smell. Nothing better.
Yeah.
The softness of the skin,
Yeah.
the softness of the teddy bear, and the integration of the cuddleness of a newborn, right?
Yeah.
And having the, as you know, Sydney, you talked about, you know, that in your private schools, that, you know, very expensive, very, you know, calibrated, that your memory is mainly of slavery and things like that. There's so much the community of, like you said, the jazz, the blues, the music, the first woman on that saved our, you know, like Hidden Treasures, you know, brought about Katherine Johnson. Those should be in the history books for you to show, the highlight the greatness, right? What's sustainable of all gods, you know, to run away and have to use a bathroom a mile away and come back and say, yeah, by the way, can you manually hand calculate where the trajectory is supposed to be so everyone lives? You know, that should be in your history books. So that being said, if we do a recap, racism, number one, is not innate, but taught and learned. Teach anti-racism. Number two, equip parents and educators with the tools and resources necessary to educate themselves and others. And three, highlight policies that don't grant equal access, specifically in education. Those three rules, to me, are an encompass of what a parent is in helping to be the partner in education. In addition to, you are looking for that collaboration and leveraging each other. So when they're at school in your hands, you're helping them to have the resources to continue your thought process. At home, you're bringing it into the fold. And then the things that they use and things they see, everyone would be, like you say, an anti-racism, because it doesn't matter whether, whatever culture it is, it's all inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah, and Bear the Truth is also so much more than just racism. We represent the children's voices on racial, social, and environmental issues. So we're going to take the same approach on anything that impacts our children in the world that we're leaving behind for them. And I think if we had to leave a tip of the day for everyone, we would just go to our motto. It's bear the truth, accept, bear the truth, and be the change. You be that.
I love it. I love it. That is fantastic. So let's say bear the truth.
Bear the truth, be the change. So.
Well, it really, know the rules of the game, bear the truth, be the change. You see the synergy?
Yes, I feel it.
Unbelievable. I love it. I love it. And crying in public?
Yeah.
Yes.
How many times have we as women felt inferior because we cried, because we weren't strong? I played water polo. It's the only girl in the entire league in 1971, and now it's an Olympic sport. So, hello, get over yourself. I mean, I got hands that can palm a ball. Sorry. Let's go. All right. So anything closing we could talk about that you'd like to talk about real quick before we wrap it up here? Any last, we got the tip.
All
So
right.
anything that you like, how do I help
I
you?
will hand it off to the young generation.
Yeah.
I love it. Sydney, you're on.
I would say that something that we're really losing touch with as a society, as a generation, is the power of reading and power of literature. Because from my perspective, the way you learn about someone else's life is through their eyes. And the most powerful way to do that is through film, television, literature. And I think that, like Sabaea said, the first time I ever read a book by a Black author in my entire education experience was my senior year of high school. And it was because I took an AP literature class that required us to read a book by a Black author. So I think if we started implementing books by diverse authors, diverse viewpoints, diverse ways of life, we can start to weed out racism and inequality on an individual level, which I think is so important. So I think as a parent, buying those books for your children, supporting Black authors, Native American authors, things like that can help you participate in the movement while also helping your child as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. How do we get a hold of you? Where do we go? What's the best way to get communication?
BearTheTruth.com. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Bear the Truth. Yeah, I think we're on all platforms, and you can also hear some of our podcasts. We're on all platforms, Bear the Truth podcast, and you can find Sydney at Crying in Public on her podcast.
Thank you very much. So again, NAWRB at NAWRB.com. This will be aired on YouTube, on iTunes, also on Anchor, and our website, NAWRB.com. So again, thank you very much for being our guest here. I'm Desirée Patno, your host of Know the Rules of the Game, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 8 a.m. So thank you all, and have a blessed day.
Thank you, Desiree.
Thank you.